There you go. Awesome. I know you've probably seen that a bunch of times anyway, but does it still give you chills?
Yeah, it's still fun watching it. And big shout out to the media team for the race. They were fantastic. I mean, I'd be racing along, and all of a sudden out of nowhere, this rib would come flying in, and they tossed me a dry bag with a mic, and we'd just start recording. And it was just fun working with them. Really good team.
And we'll get ahead of that. Before I forget, because in watching that, it brought up the question of what were the 3 goals going into this that you alluded to there?
Sure. So one of the goals was to finish the race in general. There were a lot of boats that ended up dropping out, didn't even qualify, in fact, and then some that dropped out along the course itself. Another goal, I wanted to be the first single-handed boat to finish. That was a big one for me. And then the other goal, I had set a time frame for myself at 14 days, and I wanted to finish at that time, and I finished in under 11. So I kind of blew that away, and what happened, I realized kind of through the course rather quickly, I was exceeding all of those goals. So I was having to reset as I was going, and I was sailing much faster boats, fully crewed boats, and I got a little competitive. You know, you want to beat those boats that you're with too. I mean, any 2 boats on the water are effectively racing, especially when it's actually a race, regardless of who's handicapped in that situation.
Very cool. All right, so I guess we got to assume that we don't know what the race to Alaska is, other than you sailing around a bunch of mountains and lakes and dolphins and stuff. But can you explain for the audience basically the race course in its segments, just so we know where we are? Put us in the world. Where are we?
Yeah, certainly. So the majority of the race coast is on the west coast of Canada, and we start in Port Townsend and go all the way up to Ketchikan, Alaska. Now, along that course, there is first a qualifying leg, and that goes up to Victoria. So it's about 40 miles, depending on which course you take up there. And you have to finish that within 36 hours, otherwise you're not allowed to go on. Now, the next leg after that is the 710 miles all the way up to Ketchikan. And there's a couple areas that you do have to pass through. One is Seymour Narrows, which the current can be up to 15 knots in that spot. And then the other one's Bella Bella, which they don't have hamburgers, but they do have ice cream there. So it's a fun spot to stop. Other than that, you can pick any way you want on that course. And there's not many restrictions with the race. You're not allowed to have an engine on board, but outside of that, and not allowing you to have any support, kind of pre-planned food drops, anything like that, weather routers, you can do anything you want. So there's people with pedal power, you can row your boat, you can put as much food on board, anything you want there, you can have water ballast. I mean, you can just go wild. I mean, there were 27-foot boats with trapezes off the side. And why not? It makes the boat go faster.
And a laser.
And a laser.
How far he get?
So that was the one Coast Guard rescue in the race. And I'll tell you, the Canadian Coast Guard is phenomenal. Yeah. Not only did they rescue him out of the water, they rescued the boat, the mast, the boom, delivered him to the dock and said, "Have a great day. Thank you for the training exercise."
Right. Try a Marshall cat next time.
Yeah.
So in the qualifying leg, what are the known challenges of that leg, to be able to finish it? If you can't walk, we're going to walk through the course of what makes each segment, difficult.
Yeah, sure. So the qualifying leg, it's not very far. It's not much distance to cover. However, it is open water effectively into the Pacific, and you can get a fair amount of current running through there, up to 2.5 knots, even 3 knots kind of by Victoria. And what made our year particularly challenging is they were forecasting the breeze to pick up into the mid-30s, maybe even touching 40. By the time we were by afternoon of day 1. So it's basically you had to get across to Victoria by then, or you were going to have to hole up somewhere and wait it out. And in a boat like Wildcat, I had some weight. I was probably about 2,800 pounds. But some of these other boats that are kayaks, or there was one stand-up paddleboard too in the mix. That's pretty treacherous water.
Yeah.
That's not something you want to mess around with.
Super bad ideas.
So there were a couple of guys that went this really roundabout route, and by the time they finished, they probably would have tackled 60 miles plus, but they just couldn't beat the clock.
Yeah, wow.
So it's kind of making those strategic decisions on that, knowing that if you want to do the rest of the race, you've got to get there, but you've also got to get there. If you end up breaking your boat in the middle of the course, it's game over at that point.
Yeah. So that's kind of a proving ground that you can, sail there, because even if the wind dies, then it sort of forces you to prove that you can row it or get it there by human propulsion means.
Exactly.
So that's pretty smart. All right, so once you're, is it like an overnight stop then? People having rum drinks and stuff, or is it more like, okay, you've passed, you may proceed, or do they do another start from there?
So we actually have quite a bit of time. We had quite a bit of time in Victoria. We were there 3 days roughly. I had nothing on the boat break. Everything was great. So I kind of twiddled my thumbs for a little while. And I went out and grabbed some gear for other boats if they needed it. I got some sleep, hung out. We would all go out to dinner together, have a good time. And then we started off again with a Le Mans start this time. So the first time was kind of traditional start. And then this time we all started at the top of a hill, ran down some stairs, and then ultimately we were limited by where our boat was on the dock.
Yeah,
you know,
where you are in the raft.
someone
Yeah,
else.
you're like, oh man, but yeah.
And what's really interesting about Victoria is that city has an in-water airport. So you're not allowed to sail in that harbor at all. So you have to row or pedal your way right along the edge of that. So you're going a couple miles till you get out of the harbor. Then you can raise sails and start going again.
Oh, that's cool. So it actually kind of staggers the start naturally to give people a little space when it gets nutty.
Yeah, and when you have 700 plus miles to go, you know, an extra 50 feet or so isn't going to make or break you.
So that stretch there, the 700 miles, what are the critical touch points as you go up the course?
Yeah, sure. So starting out the course, there's quite a few islands that you have to meander through coming out of Victoria. And there's a lot of current that comes through those, and there wasn't much wind when we were there. So there were a lot of decisions of which way you have to go through those islands. We all made bad decisions at one point or another. Pretty much every boat was stopped at any given time. And once you get through all that, you're kind of approaching Seymour Narrows. So everything starts to neck down in that area as you approach this area that everyone's been talking about. They say don't sail through at night, you know, don't sail through with the full current, you know, wait for slack tide. And so everyone's kind of a little nervous approaching this area, and everyone's jockeying for position for a couple of days as we go through these islands and make our way up there. And I ended up getting there at 3 in the morning and had full current with me.
Ooh,
and
I'm going for it.
Let's do it. A bunch of boats had pulled over, and I said, this will be fun to keep going.
Yeah, wow.
So I went ahead and pushed. I hit 12-1 over ground in a cat boat. I think that's a record. I'm not sure. I'll have to get Jeff to confirm that at Marshall.
With the sails down?
So there's 4 knots of breeze. Well, the funny part is going through, there's whirlpools everywhere. So the boat did 3 complete 360s going through there. And the boat was just kind of dancing going through this area. You had no control over it.
Yeah, let it go.
So just let it go. And then as you pass through, the current slowly drops off, but you have a good pull for quite a while going into Discovery Strait there.
So what's the distance between start and the Narrows?
The Narrows,
and what's the timestamp there? What are you doing? Is it overnight and just beautiful night sailing? And what happens between A and B there?
Yeah, so we had a pretty slow start wind-wise. So for us, it was anywhere from, depending on your boat, probably a day and a half to, I think some boats probably took 4 days, 5 days to get up there.
Yeah.
I was up there a little over 2.
And how much of that was rowing and sailing?
So day 1 was tough. Day 2 was tough. I rode 14 hours between the first 2 days.
Brutal.
My hands were, I had nice gloves and my hands were still a mess going through that. But fortunately, that was the most rowing continuously I had done or had to do the entire race, which was nice, a bit of a relief.
Well, there's got to be a rower or someone here, and so you can imagine like sculling a 2,800-pound boat, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
And not just that heavy, but also wide and draggy. Yeah.
Exactly.
So how do you row the thing? What's the technique?
Not very fast. So I could get up to sprinting. I could do 2.5, 3 knots if I really pushed it, but that wasn't sustainable. Unrealistic there. So it's usually around 2 knots. Maybe a touch under that, because especially when you're trying to cover 30 miles, some sort of significant distance, you can't go very quickly, and it's about being able to keep powering through that, keep your body charged with fuel, drinking plenty of water, but it's not easy. The good news is I did have a sliding seat, and this is where some pre-race strategy came in. Some boats had pedal power for their mode of propulsion, so they'd have bike pedals hooked up to a propeller in some fashion. And that's way more efficient than rowing, at least by a little bit. Unfortunately, over half of those broke during the race.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I kind of saw that coming. So just from looking at past races. So it was a matter of, efficiency, but also reliability. And that's, with almost anything on board as I prepared, it's that trade-off. Like, what trade-offs are you willing to make?
Yeah, I'm going to get to that. So Seymour Narrows, how many days are you into the race at this point by the time you get flushed?
So a little over 2 there, 2.5 days.
All right, so 2 days into it, and then what's north of Seymour Narrows?
So you get into Discovery Pass, which is pretty quick. After getting through Seymour, I rode the current until it pretty much stopped on me, pulled over and got some much needed sleep. Slept for about 4.5 hours, woke up in a beautiful little cove, and then current switched, and I jumped back out there again and continued racing. Heading for kind of what's considered the next most treacherous part of the race, Johnstone Strait. And so that area is very, very narrow, so you're probably, well,
How
so
narrow?
Seymour is
Are we talking like quarter mile?
yeah, so Seymour's about a quarter mile. A lot of water flowing through there. Johnstone opens up a little bit. You're talking half mile to a mile across. But typically with the way these passes work, you have mountains on either side. So the wind isn't going to come on the beam ever. Because of that, it's going to funnel through there. So it's either with you or it's against you going through.
Right.
Unfortunately, we all drew, where we were in the course, the upwind card. So I had 26 hours of short tacking.
Yeah, you just short tacking the side, just going right up the side, just like
exactly.
anywhere else. Yeah.
And you try to fight the current as long as you can, but eventually it wins. And the real challenge there is there's not a lot of places to pull over. So you pass one spot and you say, all right, can I stretch to the next before the current changes? And knowing if it changes before that, you're either going to drift backwards or you've really got a row to get up to that next one. So we got some very creative anchoring spots in. One of mine, there was this lit marker on the side there, and on this rock outcropping, and then another 50 feet away was the shore. And I tucked up between the two, dropped the anchor, knowing the wind and the current were in line with that pass. If it had shifted sideways, I would have hit the rocks. But I was so tired, and I was like, this will work. And it went for it. And the best part was when I woke up the morning, as the current switched, all I did was pull up the anchor, and I had my centerboard up already, being a catboat, and I drifted over the rocks and then kept going. So I didn't have to sail out and around again.
Wow.
So little catboat advantages.
Right, see that? A lot of advantages. I mean, but also with the catboat thing, right? To tack, from a human resource power, right, the boat tacks quickly, you're just tacking. There's no sail trim or pretty much anything.
It makes it much easier. It's a great single-handed boat.
Yeah.
And especially as you're going through Johnstone, where it's a lot of wind against current situation, you have square waves, 1 to 3 feet, and if you have to spend any more energy tacking, I mean, it's just costing you, because you're trying to steer through the waves as you're going anyway.
Yeah.
So every little advantage helps out in there.
All right, so from the Straits, what's north of there?
So that part got ugly. So after you've been in Johnstone, you've been short tacking, 26 hours, square waves, you're exhausted, and you just want to take the first highway exit out of there. Unfortunately, as I took that, I got pushed through the pass. I had probably 3-4 knots of current through there. That was fantastic. Got to the other side saying, nothing can be worse than Johnstone. I'm ready to be out of here. This is going to be beautiful. 6 to 7 foot breaking waves in an 18-foot boat, which is not fun. So it means with every single wave, you're taking water into the cockpit. You're getting sprayed in the face.
Big cockpit, too.
Big cockpit.
It's like a giant scoop. Like, come on, fill me up. Yeah.
Oh, exactly. I think my 33-footer has just as much room in the cockpit, if not less, maybe. So got into that situation. It was going to another 2 hours till sunset. I said, this isn't a good situation. So I flipped around, tucked behind what's called Malcolm Island. Again, not an anchorage at all, pretty flat, but I was able to get out of the swell, tucked up, maybe 30 feet from shore, dropped anchor, and spent 6 hours there, got some rest, dried out, me and the boat, and waited for that to pass. Meanwhile, looked at the tracker, every other boat had stopped, so I didn't feel too bad about that situation. Even in some of the 27-footers, those breaking waves are not fun. You're not making much progress at all.
Everybody hit the north wall.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, did you know, I'm going to go backwards to some of the route planning to know that you can stop at these certain places. So the level of preparation that you approach to this thing, like, you can go back and look at old, the documentaries and other races, talk to a lot of people. Like, how is it that you actually got prepared to run this route,
Sure.
Did you get a router and so here's,
So I had definitely talked to some people pre-race, but I think that had limited value. I mean, it certainly helped out, but there is so much more to learn about that race course. So I printed out the course full, as big as I possibly could. I've been looking at it for months. But I'd also been on my phone, at night before I went to bed, I'd find like 5 or 10 more anchorages every night on Navionics and drop those in. But then I had a kick-ass Raymarine system on board. I mean, they set me up with just about every gadget they had, and it was phenomenal. It made a huge difference racing. And I also plugged everything into that course too.
Wow.
So it gave me a lot of options. So as you're sleep deprived and trying to figure out, all right, where am I going to go? I didn't necessarily have to think that hard on it. I could say, all right, where did I already pre-plan where I could possibly tuck in? And that really helps looking at that. The course in general was kind of limited by some of the gates we had to pass through. But there were a number of options where you could cut through. And there were some good current predictions. I found some apps. Navionics had some too. There were some Canadian tide tables. But once we got past really Johnstone into that area, a lot of stuff just wasn't that accurate. So it was a lot of observing, correcting, adjusting, from there on out.
And one stoppage throws all that route planning kind of off anyway, doesn't it? Because now you're just off kilter on the currents. Yeah.
It totally does. And the other factor, I mean, with any race is all of a sudden, what's the wind going to do?
Yeah.
And that can completely change the game plan.
Yeah.
Like when I had to stop because of those breaking waves, I had a big shift in the wind that would have, if I had gone all the way across, I would have lost out. I actually gained by stopping.
Right.
So sometimes you catch a lucky break like that.
Not to mention just the mental beatdown that you get.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. I mean, mentally drained at that point. Like being able to get a little bit of support or a little bit cheering up, like that very next day as I was beating out of Queen Charlotte, more upwind work, the media boat came up and we did an interview along the way. Some of that footage was in that video earlier. And just seeing other people and like getting to interact with them is like an immediate morale boost. And you're just like, all right, let's just keep going.
Yeah.
Cape Caution's
it's human
coming up.
interaction, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Because it's, as much as I love the challenge of single handing, I like people too.
Yeah.
And so it's tough being away from people for that long. Longest I've ever done is 15 days. And this was starting to push it through certain stretches. So, yeah.
So on background, Ray, you did a couple deliveries down you spent some time sailing down the Caribbean by yourself on your larger, what do you have, a 33-footer?
I do, yeah, Luna's 33.
Right, so you actually, you don't mind being alone. That's probably a good thing, right? And your wife said, you need to go be alone for a while? Is that what it was at Cove?
She encouraged me to do the race and in a Marshall 18. So props to her and all that.
So take me back. So, I mean, it's a dumb question, but I mean, what made you want to do in the first place to be, just from there? Was it watching a documentary? Is it,
So I think it's interesting. You kind of get into doing adventures, whether it's cruising down the Caribbean, whether it's even just doing, a race weekend out here, and you just kind of keep upping it, one level higher, one level higher. So you're always looking for that next adventure, maybe a little bit of adrenaline rush, whatever it may be. And I had been following this race since its inception, aware that it was there. And I'd been probably looking at it too much online in evenings, and Allison was like, you should probably just do this race, my wife. And I was like, all right, let's do it.
Well, what element of it appeals to you? I mean, what was pulling at your heart,
Sure, I think it's the challenge of it. So I've done a fair amount of offshore racing, so, Bermuda races, that type of thing. And it's definitely challenging, a lot of fun, but the coastal aspect of sailing is a lot harder. And everyone always builds the offshore side to be that much harder. But especially if you're single-handed, there are so many more things to hit. The waves can be so much more challenging. I mean, the Gulf Stream can be tough, but this was so much worse than the Gulf Stream in so many ways. So that aspect, the single-handed aspect, narrow areas, lots of rocks everywhere, similar to the Maine coast or even up here. So it was just taking it another step, something I hadn't pushed myself to do, and I was up for that challenge.
It appealed to you. And the wife said, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, exactly. She's like, do you take out life insurance? Yeah. Like, no, I don't qualify.
Did you?
Yeah. No, don't qualify.
And then, the decision to do it in a Marshall, I mean, that's the crazy thing about this race is there literally is everything. It's the same thing with the Everglades Challenge down in Florida. It's just innovation, creativity, bring the most bizarre boat you can to complete this adventure. But like what I've seen in that race is really amazing. Catamarans, trimarans, But had anybody ever done it in a Marshall Cat 18?
First time.
First time.
First time having a cat boat.
So why that boat?
So that boat, I was trying to figure out what boat to. I was looking at some trimarans. I was kind of playing around with monohulls. I knew I couldn't take my 33-footer across the country. It was completely cost prohibitive. Wouldn't have made any sense.
Yeah, it's a long tow.
And I have to give Allison credit for it. She was the one that suggested that. And then I started thinking through it. My brother works at Marshall. He runs the yard for Jeff there. So that's a lot of fun. I mean, we could spend more time together. And that alone was enough to push me to go ahead and do that. We walked down like the next day, and she didn't know, but we bought the boat, basically. I mean, it took a couple days to close it.
What'd you pay for it?
But we paid about
What'd you pay?
$8,000 on this
$8,000.
one, but
So
it
what
needed
is-
a lot of work.
Now
to
that it won the
Yeah.
race, what is it worth?
With the electronics package and
Yeah,
everything,
if I was to buy it tomorrow, what would it go for? Come on.
good question. I mean, I don't think I'd let it go for any more than 60 right now once
Well,
I strip
who in the
everything
audience
off.
would buy his boat for what? It's ready to race. It has everything on it.
It's ready to do, it's ready to do another R2AK.
It'll be 16. I think
Yeah.
You just
Oh,
double
easily.
You double the value.
Easily. Yeah.
But so what was the boat work side of it that went into it? To knowing that you have to do these what you have to do?
So the bottom job was the first thing I tackled because I knew if I didn't do that right away, it was going to drag on and be kind of miserable. So I ended up taking 120 pounds of bottom paint off.
Oof, there you go.
No one had really stripped off in a while, mostly because I think Marshall wasn't servicing it. It was at a yard up in Maine, and I guess the owner just told him keep slapping more paint on. So that was a big job to do. I then knew if I didn't play around with the bright work right away, I wouldn't get to that. And it's important to have a pretty boat. You know, it's fun racing a beautiful
I'm assuming
boat
this
in
is
a race.
winter.
It's winter.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
That was the other win of the 18. It fit in the garage.
Yeah.
So I was able to put it in there and had a heater going. After that, there was kind of looking at structural stuff, which everything was in really good shape on that boat. Not much to worry about. I replaced the port lights, kind of anywhere that could leak. I made sure that that was all sealed up. Then I started looking at the steering side of things, making sure that nothing was going to go there. So replaced pintles, gudgeons. And then it was a look at propulsion. So it was kind of the sailing side. It was replacing, the head stay. That's all that's really there for rigging. Then going through replacing every piece of hardware. So replaced everything with Barton, running rigging, everything with Lanex. Got new cordage on there. And then started looking at the rowing station as the other side of propulsion system. So I worked with Bob Fuller at South Shore Boat Works. We made all sorts of cardboard templates, ended up making a custom rowing station, then also a custom tiller to fit over that. And meanwhile, I should mention, we also were looking at the sails side and putting a third reef in the Quantum Main there, which I ended up using.
Did you? I was like, did you get there?
I did, twice actually. So
You
I'm
were
very
talking
glad I
about
had
earlier.
it.
So how much sail was up? Was it maybe like 2 feet? It was like almost like a storm.
Not much. So you basically, when you put in that third reef,
There's
you've
nothing
got,
there.
you basically, the gaff is down at the gooseneck of the boom.
Yeah.
And so you've got a triangle up there, and that's it. And that felt like plenty when it was there.
So you got that little triangle, and you got that, 8-foot giant barn door rudder? I mean, how does that throw the balance of the boat off?
So that was actually a big part of preparing for the race, is kind of figuring out that balance and how to compensate for that large weather helm. And we found a big difference on that was actually putting a lot of forward rake on the mast. So if you look at any of the race photos or videos, you see the mast is raked really far forward, and that moves that center effort forward on the sail quite a bit. So up until 10 knots, it's actually a balanced helm, which is crazy on a catboat. Usually you can't achieve that.
You just threw like 100 years of catboat sailing logic out the window.
Exactly.
Tighter force stay, go for it. Yeah.
So it was important playing with that and kind of getting that part dialed in, because I knew the autopilot was pretty powerful, but you're using way more battery power if you have more load on it. So it's just how do you become as efficient as possible on board.
Amazing. So that's pretty much that. It's probably worth saying that Adam is also in the industry. You were the president at Edson Marine, or what was your deal? You owned it, kind of it. So, so you're well connected to the industry, but part of, we say, like doing these campaigns, like you see amateur around the world, it's so hard to break into like getting sponsors and getting gear and kind of helping undercut some of the initial costs. But for anybody in the audience that might want to go do this race, and it does help to get partners, right? And so how do you go cold call people and say, I'm doing this race, I need some blocks, I need rope, come believe in me, and then what do you have to give back?
Sure. So I think the biggest part of that is it's kind of any sales job, prepare to be rejected majority of the time. I probably contacted a couple hundred companies, and I was rejected 90+% of the time. And you have to understand, I mean, it's tough. Everyone has their marketing budgets, and sometimes it's just not a good fit, or maybe you don't give them the right pitch. You kind of miss the mark a little bit. So it's one, definitely reach out to a lot of different companies. And two, just be genuine with it. And it's, if you're real with it, if you're actually willing to work with those companies, it works out pretty well. I mean, I had it pretty easy with a few companies already having relationships. So I reached out to them. Some reached out to me before I even talked to them and said, hey, we're sending you gear, we're sponsoring you. End of story, don't argue.
Yeah,
So that was great.
Yeah,
that
I'll take it.
But like the food sponsors and such, I didn't know any of those companies yet. But an important part for me was making sure that I liked the product, I liked the people there. I wasn't willing to just bring on anyone. I wanted to actually be real about what I was talking about.
That's cool. Those are your partners, because
exactly, and it doesn't make sense to do it any other way. The reality too is once you start supporting those companies, because if you bring them on, you have to give back to them. You have to help them out. That's part of the deal. And you end up spending way more time on that than you would expect. So you end up working for very short money. At the end of the day, like the trade isn't entirely worth it money-wise. Like you could probably make more money if you just went out and worked a second job or something like that. But
you're not in it for the money.
Exactly.
You just want someone to help you.
What you end up doing is you're building a community. And so you have all of your sponsors together, all of your local community, and we threw a party before I took off, and we're like, we'll have like 20, 30 people there. Before we knew, we were close to 100 people, like hanging out in our backyard. We had beers everywhere. It was a fun time. Grills going. So that's what you're really building, and it kind of establishes future relationships, but also allows you some resources too. So if you have problems along the way or leading up to it, you can reach out to these guys, and they're willing to they want to see you succeed.
Yeah.
So that's the other win too, is you now have more friends, more people to help you.
Yeah. So essentially, it's like a good sailboat race. You were ready.
Exactly.
Your boat was pretty well dialed in, probably as dialed in as can be. You had no failures, or what was the failure to-do list at the end of the race?
The largest failure I had was I had one of the stickers come off the sail, one of the quantum stickers, and I
did see that.
and
Flapping in the wind.
That's 100% on me. What I should have done is put a hairdryer on it and heat the sticker up, and I didn't do that. So that's on me. So I apologize to Quantum for that, but that was the biggest one. But we kept one of them on there, so it was all good.
Cool. But you were ready. So what was, in hindsight, now having done the race, what was it that you wish you had on the boat?
Well, one thing I wish I didn't have, and that was I definitely brought too much food and gear. The heli stuff performed really well. I didn't change that many times during the race, so cheers, heli. I think I wore 3 to 4-ish sets of clothes, base layers in there, and I could have done with less.
Yeah, you overpacked.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Well, maybe you were lucky. Right?
Exactly. And you just never know quite what the weather's going to be on that front. And way too much food, too, but I sailed faster than I thought I would, so that worked out. But in terms of things I wish I had, I think a water ballast system would have been fun as a single-hander.
Yeah.
And with this race, what's kind of neat is you can do anything you want to the boat as long as you're not putting in propulsion, gasoline or diesel propulsion. Other than that, have fun with it.
Yeah.
So it would have been fun to experiment. I think I could have optimized the oar blades a little bit more. But at some point, as you're getting ready, you just have to call it and say, all right, the boat's ready to go. I've got to start driving across the country. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to sleep as I do that.
Yeah, right.
So we were pushing things to the last minute. But there were some areas where there was just no compromises, and it was well above and beyond. Like I mentioned, the Raymarine electronics package earlier. I mean, I had multiple alpha screens. As I was rowing, I could look back. I had a camera mounted on the bow, so I could see what was ahead of me. I could have a virtual compass there, mark the course and everything.
Oh.
It was incredible. I mean, there was one time where it was just really nasty weather. I went down below, split the chart plotter, had a camera on one side, chart plotter on the other, and just poked my head out every 10 minutes or so.
Wow.
And everyone else was getting soaked out there, and I was nice and comfy. I was eating snacks, and life was good.
Dude, you should be pro. You're good at this. Man. No, it's amazing. I mean, obviously you're a great sailor. So just real quick, again, if there's anybody inspired in the room, what is the process to enter this race? You just call the guy who runs it and say, I want to join, entry fee, what are the requirements for anybody else to go and do something such as a bad idea as this?
Yeah. Terrible idea, but I highly recommend it. So the race boss is Jesse. Jesse's an awesome guy, and he oversees this whole process along with his team. So in order to get into the race, one, you have to be crazy. Following that, you have to submit an adventure resume as well as the boat that you're planning on taking. I think there's a registration fee, maybe $50 somewhere along that.
Wow, that's it, huh?
Yeah, and there's more once you get. Sorry, that's the application fee. So I should say the registration fee is a little bit more.
That's the application fee. There's more to come.
Registration is more like $1,000.
Coast Guard
plus,
fee,
depending.
landing fee, current fee, wind fee.
But it's relatively cost-effective compared to fees for like a Bermuda race or something like that. The costs are just hidden in the boat and everything else you're about to do. The ferry ride back and all that, the logistics. So you submit your adventure resume for everyone on the crew, the boat you're taking.
What was your adventure resume? How do you write an adventure resume?
So it was actually really fun writing that because you basically get to go through and recall all the cool trips you've done over the last I don't know, maybe call it 5 years, 10 years, whatever you want to boil it down to.
So they probably got a nice book they can make,
Yeah. So it was a bunch of sailing stuff, hiking stuff. It was kind of a mix of a little bit of everything. And that kind of actually speaks to the crowd that was there for the race. Like it wasn't just sailors there. Everyone was a sailor. Plus, they were mountaineers, they were backcountry skiers, just full-on adventurers.
They're just a little bit tapped.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And everyone there was in really good shape too. I mean, any of us could have gone for a 10-mile run, anything like that. And it was just a very hyped up, athletic, excited, cool crew to be hanging out with.
So what was the interaction with that? Because we go to these regattas, you meet people, was there much interaction with the other people as you went up the course, those who, were able to soldier on?
Yeah.
And then you end up just kind of a tight-knit group at the end?
Very much so. So we're still texting. We have a text group. I think my last text from the group was about half an hour
Hopefully
ago.
they're all watching. I don't know.
Yeah, it might be. So it's a really fun crowd, and everyone's there, especially the single-handers, to support each other through the race. So we were all chatting on the radios constantly. I went ahead and put Starlink on the boat, so I could post videos along the way, also get weather forecasts and such. I was only running an hour or two.
Oh, so
a
they
day.
allow the outside routing? Or just as long as you,
As long as you're sourcing it yourself.
Yeah, gotcha.
So
okay.
anything on the web you can go ahead and grab.
Gotcha, okay. Yeah.
So with that, I was able to pass on weather info to everyone else out there.
Just
'cause
because
it's
you're
one of
the
those-
Starlink hookup.
Yeah, exactly. So it's fun talking with everyone, and
That's
I don't
awesome.
mind sharing that because there were some situations, especially. So as we came up the course, I'll kind of back into that a little bit. We went through Bella Bella. Again, good ice cream there. Make sure you stop if you do the
forgot
race.
about Bella Bella, yeah.
After that, you start to meander your way through some other islands, and then you have some choices before kind of the end of the race for your final 150-mile approach. And when we were doing that, there were winds that were high 30s at times predicted. So there were some boats that probably shouldn't have been in the sea state that was. So it was important to kind of relay that. And I had a few boats follow me through an inside cut to get behind some islands. Which turns out through that cut, we ended up getting 4 knots of current, and we were way faster than the other boats, so it all worked out.
Yeah, crazy.
But it was good. You just want to look out for everyone, because at no point, if someone gets in trouble, 100% you're turning around and taking care of them, and you just don't want to have to do that.
Right,
you want them to be successful and to keep sailing. Because there really are limited resources up there. The Coast Guard is 5 to 6 hours away, which is pretty close, but then you consider the water temperatures, and you're dead
It's
at that
fast.
point.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
game
yeah.
over. So you're really kind of keeping an eye on everyone else, whether it's on the tracker or the radio, and it also keeps all of our spirits up.
Yeah.
Especially when you're trading boats, we're taking pictures of each other and having fun. Yeah,
Hey, bro, what's going on?
yeah, exactly.
So let's just sort of summarize, because I don't know watch, so I have no idea. I could talk for hours. But the highlights for you personally on the racing side, but then also in terms of how much of a better sailor you kind of came out of this.
Sure. So I think one of the highlights at the end of the race, they have this bell that you get to ring. And for a while, you're just visualizing getting to ring that. So by the time you get to the dock, and everyone who's finished before you cheers you on at the finish when you get there. So getting to the dock, ringing that bell, that was pretty exciting. That was fun, getting to see everyone there. But I think that the bigger highlights through the race are kind of appreciating the scenery around you and the challenge you're overcoming. And it's just absolutely gorgeous throughout the entire course. So just that once in a while, when all of a sudden you just kind of look around and be like, not only am I racing, but it's a gorgeous sunset right now. This is absolutely beautiful.
The size of that mountain.
Exactly. I'm sailing next to the massive peaks. There's still snow up there.
Yeah.
And it's kind of tough to beat that. We have some pretty courses around here, but I don't think anything on that level.
Right. Yeah,
Just not mountains that close to the water. It reminded me a little bit of northern Norway, like Lofoten Islands type area. It was just a very special place to be sailing through.
And the wildlife, was it ever present?
Yes. Yeah, it kind of whales everywhere. One boat had one breach about 30 feet off their bow. It gets a little scary.
Like you weren't the guy fishing up in
dolphins.
Portsmouth, New Hampshire,
Yeah, exactly. I didn't see any bears on the way up. I was hoping to see some, but I saw some black bears once I got up there, but no grizzlies.
Is that when you stop in the camp? Is that some of the warnings? They're like, where you camp, you're gonna be, but you're in the water, so you're in the boat, you're protected.
Yeah,
No big deal.
I thought about going ashore, and it was actually kind of related to getting water, but ultimately decided to carry everything I needed on the waterfront, at least to Bella Bella, because I realized going ashore to get water was just going to be slow. So I just stayed on the water the whole time.
So what's the deal with Bella Bella? We keep going back to that's where you said you stop for ice cream. Is that also a point where a lot of people say, I'm all set and stop?
Actually, I don't think anyone quit quite there. There were definitely some repairs and stuff made. There were a couple boats with broken head stays.
So that can be a
broken pedal
repair point
drives.
at Bella Bella.
Yeah, at least I think FedEx knows where that is. So he can maybe get something shipped there.
That's awesome.
But I think it's notable because it's the halfway point, more or less, on the race.
Okay.
Even though the second, distance-wise at least, the second half that goes much faster. And then it's also a little bit of civilization when you've been in the wilderness for a while. And that's the last really spot where you can see people before you move on from there until you get to Ketchikan. And there's really nothing in between unless you go kind of deep into shore, which is slow.
Do you go
longer
into the
miles.
local pub and there's the locals there like, oh, hey, sailor, and you have.
So I ran up to the grocery store quick, did that, and then the water was broken at the docks, unfortunately. So I went up, they had this community garden, there's this really nice woman there, and she allowed me to fill up my water jugs there with her hose, and everyone was very friendly.
They know people are stopping along the way, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
She's the community hose fill. Yeah.
And they're excited about
awesome.
it. And I think that's one really cool aspect about the race is people throughout Canada know about this race, and even in the US too, everywhere. And so they're willing to help you. I mean, at one spot, I anchored, and the people up the hill, about 200 feet up, texted me and said, "Hey, do you need anything?"
Oh, that's cool.
And like, on Instagram, it was just, it was really neat to get that sort of response, that sort of support, and just kind of everyone cheering you on throughout the whole race.
Yeah, so you're like the hiker kind of passing through, and they're happy to help.
Yes.
And,
Exactly.
Oh, very cool. All right, so that sounds like a wonderful time, but there's got to be points of misery. So what were, let's take us down into the, what was, I mean, were you like, this is, why am I doing this? There had to be that one moment at least.
Yeah, there's a few. Fortunately, I thought there was going to be a few more as I was kind of waking up, and it was going to be really nasty weather, but I never had pouring rain first thing in the morning, and that's always a tough thing I've encountered before, is when you wake up
and be wet.
Yeah, and you're just like, I have to go out in the rain right now and keep sailing. Like, I'm going to sleep another 3 hours. Like, forget that. That never happened. It was always pretty nice when I woke up, so I was lucky on that front. But I think it was a few situations when the wind just died. Probably day one might have been a low point. I made a decision kind of through that first set of islands to get out of there into one of the sounds, because there was wind forecast to be there, and I could kind of reach up, which would have been fantastic. Well, I got out there after rowing for 6 hours because the wind had died inside, and there was no wind out there. And then the current turned, and then I was 3 miles out away from shore, so I had to start rowing to get close to the coast. And that was just brutal at that point, because I mean, that was 14 hours of rowing by the time I got to an anchorage. And at that point I said, oh my God, I've still got another 650 miles to go. And if I'm rowing 50% plus of the time, this is gonna be a long race.
I quit.
I'm gonna be exhausted. This is really gonna push me mentally. And I think the other time that was really tough, and that was kind of related to something similar, I was 10 miles away from the finish, and the wind was starting to drop off, and it had slowly been dying from the 30 plus it was earlier. And it got to a point where it was probably only 4 or 5 knots, and then the current switched half an hour earlier than predicted. And there I am 10 miles from the finish, and the current's building up to about 2.5 knots against me. It's a knot and a half right now because it switches pretty quick. I look at the finish, I said, that may as well be 100 miles away. What difference does that make at this point right now? And so I kind of looked at the coast pretty quick. I looked forward, I looked starboard, and I said, I think that's the way to go. So I rowed as hard as I could off to port, tucked in next to the rocky shore. I got about 20 feet away from it. At times it was maybe 15. Caught a back current up that, rode that all the way up for about 5 miles.
Wow.
Got to the last channel, turning into catch can. Current was against me again, only about half knot this time, and just powered through it. And it just kind of came to the end there of like being super frustrated when it turned, just pure determination, like, I gotta finish this race. Like, I'm so close right now.
So essentially it sucked in the beginning and it sucked in the end, but it was beautiful between.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the funny part, I told my wife it was gonna be 14 days roughly to finish. So she said, well, I'll get in early. I'll be there at like 11 days. And she texted me as she was flying out of Boston. And I had, I don't know, maybe 40 miles to go at that point, 50 miles to go. And she said, I'll race you to the finish. Well, I beat her to the finish. And I don't think she'll ever forgive me. She wanted to be there to welcome me in, but it is what it is there, and it was.
I got to finish this damn
As soon as she
thing,
challenged me, I was like, well, of course I'm going to try to see if I can beat her at that point.
He wants to win everything. All right, so just to close out this sort of experience, right? But you get to catch again, you have a party. The people win. The overall winner wins a knife, right, or not a set of knives.
First place was 10 grand.
Oh,
second
so they
place,
added money this time.
Yeah, second place is a set of steak knives, and everyone else just can be appreciative they finished.
Right, absolutely.
And it was fun. I did
part of the tribe.
Yeah.
Check.
So you're kind of trying to figure out, where you fit in there. And after the finish, I found out I set a couple of records, which was fun.
All right. Yeah. So what are the records? Yeah.
So fastest single-handed monohull ever to finish.
And what was the previous record, or did they just never?
So previous record, I want to say it was about 3 or 4 hours later. So it was just broke it, which was kind of neat.
And what kind of boat was it? Do you remember? Or
I don't recall.
You're going to have to find this fact.
Yeah, if you jump into the Chelsea seats, they call it, you can see kind of previous boats and such in there.
Okay, cool. So you got to find out who's the record you're chasing, right? Okay. So fastest solo monohull, and what else?
Fastest monohull under 20 feet and under to finish. So they have a 20-foot and under class that they give like a small prize to. The Hobie 16 won this year on that one.
Oh, sweet.
So I couldn't compete with the multi-hull, but it was still, cheers to them. They sailed a good race. Yeah.
Double-handed or single?
They were double-handed. So that's another, that's part of the reason I chose to go in a small boat and single-handed. I wanted to up the challenge even more beyond just what.
But I also appreciate what you said about just slowing down and enjoying the journey.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah. I understand. All right, so congratulations. Come on, a couple records, amazing experience. No, it's really cool. I hope social media, all this stuff. Like, you should definitely go on a winter road show and share your story. You got beautiful stuff, and nicely done. It's great adventure.
Yeah, it was.
I'm
I
glad
definitely
you did it,
recommend
not
it.
me. I'm
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
You definitely have to be in the right mindset for it.
Yeah,
It's a very different race than anything else, and I think it's the grassroots side that's really cool about this race. I wasn't around sailing in the 1960s, 70s, but I imagine this is more what it was like.
Yes.
And it's just very neat experience from
Right.
that
So
standpoint.
yes, we're talking with the Commodore,
Yeah.
like adventures
Yeah.
and making it fun, and yeah.
Yeah.
So congratulations again.
Thank you.
Audience, as limited as we are, any questions for him?
How'd you train physically?
Yes. Physically.
Yeah,
Look at him.
very
He's a
good question.
specimen. Yeah.
So going into this, I was rowing already with this group called the Gray Buzzers. We row whaleboats out of New Bedford. So I was doing that 1 to 2 days a week, depending on weather and such. Then I had a rowing trainer at home. I was lifting weights. If we go out hiking or anything like that, I do that as well. But just trying to stay as active as possible and kind of thinking back to when I was kind of full on 3-season sports, doing all that. Anything you can do to give yourself an edge, like even when you go to the grocery store, like park at the far end of the parking lot.
Right. Yeah.
Don't take the escalator, take the stairs. Little stuff like that, and kind of staying limber too, making sure you stretch out plenty, because that'll really get to you too as well, especially when you're on a boat like that.
Yoga's good.
Yes, yoga's good.
Yoga's good.
But yeah, I mean, you just have to kind of imagine what you might be going through. But at the end of the day, I mean, similar to training for a marathon, you're never actually going to go out and run, 26.2 miles. Your body just, that's pushing it to the very edge. So I never rode for 8 hours straight training for this, but a couple hours here and there at a time, certainly.
I know, like it's hard to know what the next step is if you're, now done solo long distance racing. But do you see yourself doing more of the, the larger races like the Transat Jacques Fabre or something like that? Do you see yourself going in that direction?
See, so my question is, you said, I need my next adventure. So what is your next adventure?
So that's an awesome question. I've definitely had my eye on that stuff, and that may be coming up at some point. I think that the largest challenge after coming off of these races, kind of leading into that, I'll circle back a little bit more on that, is you're doing this race, there's such an emotional high to it. As you come off of these races, like it's pretty easy to slip into a depression and just be like, what's next, and just kind of get bored. And so like you definitely need that next adventure planned or have something kind of in the queue. So for right now, we're doing a bunch of cruising around New England here, hanging out where we are because it's beautiful around here in the summer, as everyone here knows. Like it's probably the best spot to be.
That's why we're here, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm still working on planning that next adventure right now. But definitely some longer distance stuff. Love to cross some oceans too. Around the world will be in the queue at some point as well. So we're kind of working on putting that stuff together. I think one of the bigger things, I love the solo stuff, but I'd love to drag Allison in too. I don't know if she's here yet, but she, doing some double-handed stuff. I love doing that as well. And I do a fair amount of crude stuff. I mean, I race with 9 people on a boat as well. But it's fun to have that mix and that additional challenge of just a few people on the boat's exciting and fun. So yeah.
The one thing is that unlike the long ocean racing, you have the coast. The coastal racing is kind of unique about. That's sort of missing when you're doing the long ocean races.
Well, it's also that's how the French become so great, is because they coastal race in that.
Exactly.
In one of the hardest places to sail, right?
Exactly, and 100% on that. I think if you train on the coastal stuff, the offshore becomes that much easier. Because the offshore stuff, it's a lot easier to sleep for 90 minutes, a full REM cycle. When I was sailing overnight, I could never sleep for more than 20 minutes at a time before there was an issue. So being able to, I know, right? It's exhausting. And your memory starts to go, and it's
Start to feel weird.
Yeah, exactly. A little delusional.
Yeah, is that bird looking at me?
Yeah. You start talking to yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love the offshore stuff too. I mean, that's also fun because you can really put the miles down. Like you look at this race, it's 750 miles. You compare it to, Bermuda race is pretty similar. That's about 650. But the time to complete this race is so much longer because there's so many more obstacles to get around and so much more current to fight throughout the race.
Absolutely.
Would you ever do it again in a different boat, different way?
Yeah, certainly. I thought about that. I don't know that I'll do it in the
You gotta go for
very
the
next
trimaran
cycle.
record, yeah.
I love doing it in the Marshall. It ended up being the perfect boat. I absolutely loved doing in that boat. I had all of the shelter I needed, and I was so shocked at how fast that boat was. Once I pulled the board up going downwind, I mean, there was one night I was surfing waves, and I was between 8 knots and 9.2 for hours on end.
It's so
Just absolutely
stable and wide.
crushing it.
It's just kind of a giant sea pod going down the
Exactly.
street, yeah.
It's like I don't know. It's like the original like mini 6.5.
Yeah,
boat. I
exactly.
mean, it was
Yeah.
it was so quick.
Yeah.
But
It's
it
cool
would,
before wide transoms were cool.
exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
But I love to try a different boat, like a number of single-handers. We were talking about like, what if we did in trimarans? Like, how would have we done relative to what we did right now? And that's another trade-off with the race course to consider. Is there are so many logs out there that if you bring in, I mean, there's a number of boats that have had to drop out because they've had collisions and them close to sinking, and that was game over for them. Including the boat that won this year. They raced 2 other times and had to drop out both those other years. Didn't even finish, I believe. So
logs are the biggest obstacle on the water. Yeah.
and there's some big ones, like there's
Yeah, I
full-on
bet.
trees.
I bet. Yeah.
I mean, it's scary. I mean, you go
It's
by
big
'em.
tree chunk of your country up there. Yeah.
Yeah, and the Marshall 18 has a really thick hull, so it was awesome for that sanderling to be able to handle it. There's a big scratch down the port side from a big one I hit in the middle of the night. No idea how big it was, but I could keep sailing with
Oh, you left that out
confidence.
of the lowlights story. But that's
Oh
okay.
yeah, yeah, it was just a thud, it just, yeah.
Oh, okay. It was quick. Yeah. Fuck. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Anybody?
What
Yeah.
kind of boat did you envy when you were down on your dumps? Like what
Oh.
did you want to have when
A motor?
Yeah. It's funny. We
a
actually
little electric outboard. You know?
So in our Leaders 33, we sold engineless for 3-4 years, and now we just have an electric motor. So like sailing engineless isn't new for me or
Yeah,
for
yeah.
the two of us, and so that never really crossed my mind too much. The fact that I had oars to actually be able to move in no wind, and I was allowed to use them was pretty neat.
Yeah. What the heck? Might as well get some exercise too. Yeah.
But in the no wind, I don't know that I was really envying too many other boats because I think everyone had that same struggle. So no matter what you had, but I think what I had in my mind was wishing that not only did I have oars, but I also had a pedal station.
Oh,
Because it'd be
pedal, yeah,
nice to alternate between the two of them.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess in any of the light stuff, you wish you had the smallest boat possible. So you wish you had like something that weighed like 500 pounds and you could just push ahead at like 4 knots.
but is that like 20% of the race or 10% of the race or 5%?
Good question. About 12% this year.
Yeah.
So that's the trade-off too. Is like every year's a little bit different. So you never know. And that was one thing I came out of the race like. After the race, we all got together and we'd have a couple drinks together, dinner, and we'd always just talk about like what's the perfect boat for this race.
Yeah.
And it depends so much every single year. One boat is a 40-foot
There is no
monohull.
horse for the course.
Exactly.
Yeah, it sounds like
So you're taking a chance no matter what, and everything's a calculated risk in whatever you pick.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
The pedal station, that would be with, you could pedal with your, could you explain how that would have worked on that boat?
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple different ways people did it. One was some of the Sanderlings have an inboard engine. So if you had that set up, you could hook up the pedal drive with like a loop of chain, or you could do kind of a rubber belt to that prop shaft. So you'd be kind of sitting in the cockpit, just kind of pedaling from there. The other option, which a lot of boats did, is it was similar to an outboard concept. So they would have a pedal station with essentially a foil with a prop on the end that would drop down into the water, and they'd be facing aft typically, and then they'd be pedaling that, and then they could lift that up when they were sailing. So it was kind of either an add-on or kind of built-in type of system.
That's the engineering fun part for the nerds of the fleet.
Oh,
like,
totally.
yeah,
And
that's-
I would have relished in that, but it was just like kind of picking with, I committed to it in January. So within like basically a 4-month period, what do you think you can tackle?
Yeah, yeah.
And knowing when to cut that off.
Very cool.
I think you had a question
Yeah.
back there.
It was
Yeah.
very similar to her question. It was similar enough that you don't need to
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I want to make sure we didn't leave you
You're
out.
good, yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody in the back? Otherwise, yeah, Katie.
What type of prep work did you do to understand all those like back eddies and the weird tides in there? That seems like the toughest part of the race.
100%. There was a very steep learning curve. So this is my very first time racing in the Pacific Northwest. I'd never been up there or on the west coast of Canada. So I had been looking online, looking through forums. I picked up a book, actually. I'm trying to think of the name of it. It's something about cruising in the
Pick up a cruising guide. Yeah.
yeah, so there is a cruising guide up there.
Yeah.
And that was somewhat helpful reading through that. But a lot of it, the questions aren't answered. So there was a lot of having to learn on the fly. And so you make mistakes, and then you have to learn very quickly from them. Otherwise, they will eat you up through the rest of the course. So that's really what I suggest going through. I mean, take in all the resources you can, talk to other racers, because they can help you out a little bit. But being able to kind of like at the finish, I quickly looked at 2 different coasts and made the right decision. I could have made the wrong decision, but I think from looking at enough of it, it helped to know which side to go to. And if you get a chance to do some cruising or like practice up there ahead of time, like that would have helped out tremendously. But I just kind of got thrown into it. And I think day 1 I made a mistake going into that light air, trying to get out of the islands too quickly. And so you just have to grind, keep your head down, and kind of say, all right, I'm not making that mistake again, and just kind of keep working through that. And so it was a tough learning experience at times. And I feel next time going back, I could be even faster as a result of that.
Yeah. You got to write the Adam's definitive guide to the R2K. Selling copies of it. Yeah. Brochure style.
Well, and it's interesting. We had all kind of talked about that, and then we had talked with the race organizers, and they said it's actually probably best that you don't do that because it's kind of fun for everyone to learn on their own.
Interesting point.
And if they have to talk to you, that builds community.
Right.
So don't be afraid to share information. Just don't make it necessarily too easy to get to. Make them come to you and talk, because I think that's a big part of it, is growing the R2AK family.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. That is why the race remains a mystery.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
All right, cool. I could go on all night, but the sun is setting, and you got to get home. And anybody else before we, Jared? No. So, how are the sales? Final question for Jared.
Oh, sales are fantastic.
Yes,
Yeah. No, that was on me. That was on me. But actually, I mean, having all the reef points was fantastic, having them rigged up. I mean, I was constantly putting in reefs in that boat. I mean, I start putting in a reef anywhere between 12 and 14 knots in that boat. So it's happening a lot. Yeah.
All right. So there is the, you got your signature edition of the Quantum Marshall 18 Cat sale.
Yes.
That you can buy next fall. Right?
Yeah, there you
Taking
go.
orders. There you go. 2% royalty. He's happy.
Very fast.
All right, cool. So we were talking with the Commodore here that let's get a Beetle Cat class here next year, or a Beetle Cat, or at least the Marshall Cats. And Alarians will get some classics up here for race week. And you got to come, and you're going to be the fleet leader, I think.
That would be fun.
Yeah. We'll put him on, get him on a free boat. So cool.
Kudos to you for sailing rope for bringing him here.
Oh, hey, man. I feel like,
Yeah, thank you, Dave.
I love doing these, and I always fun sometimes. And we did this when we were in San Diego. I was telling him earlier. We had Andrew Campbell, who's the flight controller for American Magic, who is in just a stunning, amazing individual. What he's accomplished in his young life. But like, there was 10 people in the audience. It was in Coronado, and he's like, I don't care. These are my friends and my family. They're like, so every time I look at a small audience, I think like, whatever. Everybody here had a great opportunity to hear a cool story. And
Well, exactly.
thank you
to everyone.
You
that
should go
came.
be famous. Yeah.
Well, and we're recording it, so anyone can watch it too online.
We'll put it up on YouTube,
Yeah.
and but thank you everybody for sticking around, and have fun if you're racing. Phil, that's it. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, brother. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Nice meeting you.
Yeah, appreciate it. That was fun. Yeah.
I drank my rum. You got to finish yours. Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking too much.
All right. Yeah. Anyway, if you have questions, you can think about me. And the microphones works. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I'll
those
take
work
off
really
the hot
well.
mic.